Jennie-Rebecca Falcetta, and I am very happy to be here today. As I said to Bill Cross just a few minutes ago, Patrick has been asking me to do adult ed for about a year and a half, and I keep putting it off, but I couldn't put it off any longer, so here I am. And I thought as I was preparing, how can I speak into this moment in our national life? How can I speak to this moment in our ecclesiastical life together? And I realized, you know what? I can't. So instead, I thought, can I bring something of delight? Can I bring something of play? And maybe offer a way to look at something that seems very familiar in a way that might be totally new to us. So I brought my friend today to help me. My friend who is the same friend who's up on the screen. George. George. And without any context, what is happening?
I see a ball and I see you're dancing on top of a sphere. Could be a kid's globe and there could be the globe here. Am I hanging myself?
No. I mean, he's standing on top of this ball, right?
Yeah.
He's balancing. He's balancing. It's very precarious. Then he gets even more precarious in the bottom, right? But we know it's not two Georges. We know it's the same George.
Curious?
Very curious. And so children's picture books operate in a very specific way. And so what I hoped that we could do today is talk about some of the ways that the genre works in order to better understand the way that they operate, but also to know that we can read them as allegories of grace. There are all kinds of ways to think about the ineffable and the philosophical in this genre. So I just wanted to play around together and maybe have a little bit of story time, because who doesn't love story time? So we're going to talk about children's picture books as allegories of grace or of redemption. Now, as good thinkers, we need to be responsible and define our terms. So what actually is a picture book? A picture book is not any book that's illustrated, but it's specifically a book in which the images and the texts are part of a whole totalizing design, and they work together to create meaning. And sometimes those meanings are complementary, sometimes they're contradictory, sometimes you get one kind of information from the text and another from the image. And so I've offered for us the criteria for a picture book that the Caldecott Medal folks use in what they choose as picture books for their competition to award the Caldecott Medal for distinguished illustration in children's picture books. So it has to have a collective unity of storyline, theme, or concept, and that the pictures are very much part of the storytelling. And what is an allegory? I think we also need to define that. And our friends at Merriam-Webster say, it's the expression of truths or generalizations about human existence by means of symbolic, fictional figures and their actions. So fables and parables are allegories. And our other friend, Jesus, also told a lot of these mini allegories. Matthew 13 is full of them. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, a treasure hidden in a field, a net, yeast. So an allegory uses one set of symbols to talk about something else, right? A really strong and timely example was the crucible, which came onto the stage in 1953, ostensibly talked about the Salem witch trials, but was really speaking into the moment of McCarthyism, right? So things that talk about other things. All right. But today I want to share 3 allegories, 3 of my favorites. I feel like mid-century was kind of a high point for these allegories that use animals in the stead of humans. And the first one I would like to share is Harry the Dirty Dog. And I'm just going to read it to you because it's relatively short. And then I want you to think about how it might be an allegory, but also think about afterwards. I'm gonna give us some little ways into how picture books work from a scholarly point of view. But to start, we'll just read. And I have another copy that we can pass around. But I'm just gonna read. Harry was a white dog with black spots who liked everything except getting a bath. So one day, when he heard the water running in the tub, he took the scrubbing brush and buried it in the backyard. Then he ran away from home. He played where they were fixing the street and got very dirty. He played at the railroad and got even dirtier. He played tag with other dogs and got dirtier still. He slid down a coal chute and got the dirtiest of all. In fact, trying to read upside down, he changed from a white dog with black spots to a black dog with white spots. Although there were many other things he wanted to do, Harry began to wonder if his family thought that he had really run away. He felt tired and hungry too. So without stopping on the way, he ran back home. When Harry got to his house, he crawled through the fence and sat looking at the back door. One of the family looked out and said, "There's a strange dog in the backyard." And by the way, has anyone seen Harry? When Harry heard this, he tried very hard to convince them that he was Harry. He started to do all of his old clever tricks. He flip-flopped and he flop-flipped. He rolled over and played dead. He danced and he sang. He did these tricks over and over again. But everyone shook his head and said, "Oh no, it couldn't be Harry." Harry gave up and walked slowly toward the gate. But suddenly, he stopped. He ran to a corner of the garden and started to dig furiously. Soon, he jumped away from the hole, barking short, happy barks. He found the scrubbing brush, and carrying it in his mouth, he ran into the house. Up the stairs he dashed, with the family following close behind. He jumped into the bathtub and sat up begging. With the scrubbing brush in his mouth, a trick he certainly had never done before. "This little doggy wants a bath," cried the little girl, and her father said, "Why don't you and your brother give him one?" Harry's bath was the soapiest one he'd ever had. It worked like magic. As soon as the children started to scrub, They began shouting, "Mommy! Daddy! Come quick! It's Harry! It's Harry! It's Harry!" They cried. Harry wagged his tail and was very, very happy. His family combed and brushed him lovingly, and he became once again a white dog with black spots. It was wonderful to be home. After dinner, Harry fell asleep in his favorite place, happily dreaming of how much fun it had been getting dirty. He slept so soundly, he didn't even feel the scrubbing brush he'd hidden under his pillow. So George, what's happening? As perspicacious readers, no doubt you have thought or can understand how it works as an allegory. So I'm interested in your ideas about that, and then I want to show you, take it next level with some analytical tools. But I'm just interested in how you would read this as an allegory.
Appearances are deceiving. So a person in a different costume you may not recognize as a loved person because of the appearances.
Absolutely. Appearances can be deceiving. And an idea of being recognized as who we are. But what are the things that can keep us from being recognized?
It kind of seems to me like an allegory about rebellion, and then kind of recognizing that maybe what you thought you wanted isn't what you really wanted.
Right. And home is such a pull, right? Home and safety and belonging are such a theme of so many children's books. And I think we learn that early, that that's something to be desired and valued, right? Certainly The Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home.
It's also seems to be an allegory about getting lost in play, losing yourself in the act of playing, so you actually forget. You become somebody else.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting to me because I think we could just read it as an allegory about being blackened by sin, right? And then the thing that you hate, the thing that you repudiate, the scrubbing brush and the bath is what you need to get clean. But I think it's a little bit more sophisticated than that, because there's nothing wrong with what Harry does. He just goes out into the world and explores, right? He has so much fun getting dirty. And running around and exploring and sniffing and playing is what dogs do. So there isn't anything wrong with what he does, but he knows that he has to do something before he can be accepted back home, right?
And I think the author can use an animal to do that, because if they actually did with human, you wouldn't want your child to be read a story of it and he's going to go out and do whatever the bad things are. That was 1956, so whatever that bad thing was. So that exploratory is in Christian circles, you're not supposed to do that. You shouldn't try smoking, and you can't do this. So I like it. Maybe a child could experience naughtiness without punishment.
Right. And that's such a good point about the way that children's books work developmentally, right? They give children lessons that are playful, that they can understand, but that are also removed from their direct experience because they're animals, right?
Interesting that he hid the scrubbing brush so that he could go on and then be naughty. And then salvation was when he found the scrubbing brush. That was his salvation.
And he had to go after it himself.
Yes.
He couldn't be forced into the tub. He had to jump into the tub of his own accord to become clean so his family could recognize him again. And I just think that's so wonderful. So when I was in graduate school, I studied children's literature expert who became my faculty mentor, and I learned so many things from her. But one of the coolest things I ever read in my entire life was this essay about picture book codes by a scholar named William Mebius. And this opened my eyes to the ways that children's picture books are actually the most sophisticated of genres. We think they're for children, but they're actually so much more brilliantly designed than maybe we would at first see. So I just want to review a few of these with you that we can kind of keep in our minds as we look at Harry a little bit more deeply, and then at a couple more books that I've brought along to just share with you. So he talks about the importance of stable visual cues. Whenever we ask, who's that? The person needs to stay the same, unless, of course, like Harry, his change in appearance is part of the plot, right? Going from a white dog with black spots to a black dog with white spots is part of his character arc. So when he changes for a reason. But as we saw with our friend George in the first slide, he needs to stay looking like Curious George all the time. We always need to know that it's Curious George. So the stability of the character's appearance is important, unless, of course, the change is important. There's also gates, doors, windows, stairs, roads, and also the way that light changes are all visual cues that we should pay attention to as well, because those are not accidental, he says. And the graphic codes are simultaneous and they're interactive. And so multiple of these codes, and I'm going to take you through a few of them, work at the same time, right? So we can have this idea of light, and we can have this idea of a window, working at the same time. And he suggested these as kind of tendencies and suggestions. They don't always work the same way all of the time, but what's important is to think about what's called the presented world in the scholarly kind of terminology or the in-universe of each book is going to have its own codes, right? So that color is going to work in a particular way in a book, but it might not work the same from book to book. So Bill Mebius encourages us to pay attention to the codes of position. Where is the character on the page? Are they high or low? Are they in the center or on the fringe? Being low can be a mark of low social status, low power, low influence. Being high can be ecstatic, right? Or sometimes being high can be out of control. If Curious George is up in the balloons and he's lost his way and the man with the yellow hat has to bring in the helicopter to save him, well, that's kind of a precarious position. In general, because page openings are part of these are called openings or page spreads, part of the structure of the design. So sometimes a page opening will depict one scene across the left and the right. Other times, there will be more than one scene, right? So you have the bath, and then you have after the bath. But then we have these moments where a character is in a situation of what he calls diminishing returns. So if a character is depicted frequently on the same page, that can be an indication of precarity. It can prefigure that something not very good is about to happen, like with George and the ball. So a character who's in multiple sequences is very likely not in control of what's happening, right? And here we see Harry is not in control. He's not recognized. And so despite doing all of his tricks and everything that he thinks will gain the family's love, they still don't recognize him. Perspective, of course, is important. Horizons that vanish or appear, vanishing points, contrasts, use of space, that's all important. Above and below and where things are on the horizon, he says, pay attention to that. The codes that he calls of framing, right and round. Sometimes the frame, there is no frame. Sometimes there becomes a frame. So with a frame, it's kind of looking into a world. Without a frame, the totalizing image is a totalizing world. And then enclosures are important. Round can be sometimes more freeing, and angular shapes, a character contained in an angular shape, is more about captivity or lack of freedom. And then lines and capillarity are really important. So are there jagged lines? Are there energy lines? Are the lines soothing? Is there cross-hatching? Cross-hatching can sometimes indicate anxiety or tension. In this essay, he uses where the wild things are as kind of his text that he tests all these things out. And I've had the experience of reading this essay with students and then doing a reading of where the wild things are, and we see all these things that he's talking about in the essay happen, and it's unbelievable. The way that, like, at the beginning of the book, the smaller frame, and then pretty soon he's in where the wild things are, and it's the whole page spread. And then when he goes back home, it shifts. So with Harry the Dirty Dog, we see these moments of precarity, and then we see when he's in his bath, he's in a circular shape, right, which is a place of freedom and a place of safety. He's on the left side of the page, which is more of the place of safety or arrival rather than the departure. So very often characters, when they're moving to the right, they're moving across the page, they're moving into danger or uncertainty or adventure. So Harry, of his own accord, digs up the scrubbing brush, submits to the discipline of the bath, and is reunited with his family. But there is setting up for a sequel, and in fact there are many Harry books, including one where he gets knitted this sweater with roses on it that he just hates. But the scrubbing brush, he continues to hide it. He dreams about how much fun it was getting dirty. This probably isn't the last time, but maybe now he knows how to come home, right? He can go out into the world and then he can come home.
Jennie-Rebecca?
Yes.
Talk about those codes. How many illustrators or children's book authors are aware of those codes or could say what they are? Is it just implicit, meaning it's sort of one of those things like in our language we have patterns of speech that we are unconscious of, and they just or is this something that is kind of widely shared among authors?
I think that's a really good question. A good critic, like William Moebius, is usually calling attention to something that's already happening. So my sense is, if you're working with an artist like Maurice Sendak, who was a genius, they're already doing that, and the critic is just calling attention to it. Right. So I think that those codes evolved over time as the genre evolved, right? And so the genre that we know as children's picture books really is not that old. And I think it comes to a high point in terms of these kind of animal allegories in the mid-20th century. Because I think there has been a turn toward, in some ways, toward more biographical children's picture books, more work about historical figures. I mean, I was just looking at the library and I was trying to find something akin to this that was a little bit more recent, and it was harder to find. And there's, of course, like any field, there's always trends, there's always changes. But my sense is the illustrators are working this way instinctually, and the critic is just attention to and giving it a language, right? Which is what a good critic will do, is give a vocabulary.
Or maybe someone like Sendak, who's such a great genius, sets a tone or kind of sets something in motion, and other illustrators who can internalize it.
Absolutely.
You guess.
Right, and artists would just do something like this. They don't need a critic to tell them what they're doing, right? The rest of us need the critics to understand. So the second book that I decided to bring today was The Runaway Bunny.
I'm sensing a theme here.
You can't really do this without bunnies. Monkeys. So if any of you have seen the play or the film Wit, which was written by Margaret Edson, it's about a professor of Renaissance literature, which in the film is played by Emma Thompson.
It's an amazing movie.
It's an amazing movie. She's dying of cancer. But there's this, because she studies John Donne, the idea of wit and wittiness and turns of phrase is what she values. And so near the end of the film, when she's in extremis, her mentor comes and reads her The Runaway Bunny. And the mentor, in the film, she's played by the great Eileen Atkins. And she reads her The Runaway Bunny, and just a minute or two in, she says, "Oh, a little allegory of the soul." And so I wasn't thinking of that when I thought about this topic, but I remembered that, and I went back and rewatched the clip, and it's very moving. It's very moving to think about hearing this on the end of your sojourn here. I won't read the whole thing, but thinking about the codes and how the codes might help us, we have a little bunny who wants to run away. He said to his mother, "I am running away." "If you run away," said his mother, "I will run after you, for you are my little bunny." And notice that we're starting in black and white, right? It's like the beginning of The Wizard of Oz. "If you run after me," said the little bunny, "I will become a fish in a trout stream, and I will swim away from you." "If you become a fish in a trout stream," said his mother, "I will become a fisherman, and I will fish for you." So we go from black and white into this glorious color moment where we have the tiny little bunny becoming a fish and the large mother becoming this fisherwoman, fisher bunny. And the book goes on like this, with the little bunnies saying, "If you become a fisherman, I'm going to run further away. I'm going to become a rock on the mountain." And the mother says, "If you become a rock, I'll become a mountain climber." And then we go into this glorious color, and it's the full page opening. And that's the pattern of the book. So the book is using color in a particular way. And I think when we get to a certain point, we get these almost surreal images. I don't know if you can see them, but the bunny says, "If you follow me, I'll become a sailboat." And the mother says, "Then I'll become the wind and blow you where I want you to go." And then the bunny says, "I'll become a bird." And the mother says, "I'll become a tree that you fly home to." Right? So thinking allegorically, where the book ends with one transformation after another. But what's interesting is that the last thing that the bunny says, "I'll become a little boy and run into a house." "If you become a little boy," said the mother bunny, "I will become your mother and catch you in my arms and hug you." And then we have this really interesting callback to the room in Goodnight Moon, right? So there's some beautiful intertextuality there. But it's interesting that the next thing that he wants to be is a little boy. Like, are the bunnies aware of humans? And then with that last image, the bunny just says, "Shucks," said the little bunny. "I might as well just stay here, where I am, and be your little bunny." And so he did. "Have a carrot," said the mother bunny. And then the last full spread is them together in the round on the right, right? So they're in a safe space. They have arrived, right? And that's the last thing that we see. So I'm curious what you all think, because Bill Moebius's codes, of all the codes that he gives us, the place where he's least definite is color. And I think that's because color is used so differently from text to text. So I'm reading the black and white as the actual discussion that the mother and the bunny have. And then the color as either an imaginative vision or as the thing actually happening. And I'm not sure which to go with. Maybe it's both, right? But there's definitely a difference between the kind of prosaicness of the black and white. And if we think about lines, right, there's very minimal lines, and then we get this lush, full color spread, and then these strange shapes, right? These strange, like, they just really remind me of surrealist paintings in some way, right? With these kind of, this gigantic bunny blowing the wind, or this gigantic bunny made out of leaves, right? They're almost terrifying, right? She's almost terrifying in that love. But do we identify with the bunny, the little bunny who wants to run away? Do we identify with that? And who comes after us? Who takes the shape that we need to meet us where we have run off to?
So whenever I've read this book, I've always thought of the song that says, "And where can I hide from your spirit? The depths, you're there."
Absolutely, that's very perspicacious. And in fact, I was trying to find images to put onto the slides, and I ran into a couple of blogs or like websites where people were doing that very thing, saying like, here's this book and here's that song, and they really illustrate each other, right? There is nowhere that the bunny can go to be out of reach of his mother. He tries everything. He even goes to the circus. "I'm going to be a trapeze artist." "Well, I'm going to walk the tightrope to you," she says. She'll do anything. Janice.
I think it's curious that, since I've been coming to Episcopal Church, I'm more aware of the female part of God, or that we can, it's not always male. So often in these stories in the 40s, it's the female parent. I didn't think of this one book, we're going on a bear hunt, a dad is in that one. But so often safety was the must. But in American Christianity, we often push away the femaleness.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. And we learn from our friend Julian of Norwich, God is father and mother, right? And so this idea of the female qualities of the God who loves us so much to take the form of whatever we need, right? And so I love this as an allegory of incarnation. And the mother is not afraid to become whatever she needs to become. And she's able to do that. And in the end, it's, again, the bunny is convinced that the best place to be is home, right? He has to figure that out for himself. And so I think in both of these texts, we also have this idea of free will that's operating. The bunny realizes after all of those discussions, well, the best place is here. I can't really outrun you. I might as well just stay. And so he stays. And I love this image of abundance, right? There's all, I don't know if you can see it, but there's all this lettuce and tomatoes and vegetables inside their little hollow, but also out in the field, right? They are never going to run out of food or love. Phil,
As having raised teenagers to adulthood, I think there's also an allegory here of the individuation that young people go through as they separate and mature from parents and then eventually come back. That individuation that goes on as part of maturity.
absolutely. It's very natural to want to go out and play with other dogs and play in the cool chutes and climb a mountain and try on different forms, right? And I think that's such a beautiful observation, Phyllis, for a little bit later in life when you're a teenager and you don't know who you are and you're trying on, am I a trapeze artist? Am I a flower, right? And knowing that someone loves you so much to accompany you in that journey of figuring out who you are, right? That's a really, really beautiful idea. Bill.
So perhaps as a part of that, a wise word from a very gifted author of books for adults is relevant. A friend of mine who's also a biographer said that a cardinal rule in writing his work is to keep the hero in trouble. And in some ways, that advice is countercultural because we are regularly given signals that adversity is not normal. But I think we read in the Bible and read in common sense that adversity is normal and that God is with us in adversity. And the arc of our lives is one in which we can and will and should encounter trouble. And that's part of the narrative of all kinds of journeys. Bunny's journeys, dogs' journeys, children's journeys, adults' journeys. And these are journeys that are shaped by God, and we will find greater meaning if we recognize that He's holding us in the hollow of His hand through that trouble in which we often live, whatever that trouble may be.
Thank you. And that trouble is kind of unavoidable, right? Try as we might. And just from a purely narrative point of view, without trouble, there's no story. If things just stay the same, that stasis is not good writing, right? We need that journey, we need that trouble, we need that conflict in order for there to be any story.
I wonder how many stories, children's stories, have this cyclic return motif versus a kind of more linear progression where you're getting to a destination. Do you know?
I think that's a great question. I think if we had an actual children's literature specialist here, they could answer it. She deflected.
You're pretty good, you're pretty good.
So I think it was a revelation to me, like I said with reading this essay when I was in graduate school, that children's literature was not just about teaching children and children's literacy, but that it was a scholarly field about art and design as well. That there were, we could analyze it in the way that we analyze poetry or that we analyze fiction, right? That it has conventions, it has ways of operating, it has categories of analysis, and that amazing to me and made me have a renewed appreciation for what, in my mind, is the absolute all-time best children's book of all time, forever, The Country Bunny and the Little Gold Shoes, which I would like to share with you all. My book is so precious to me for a number of reasons. First of all, it has my mother's handwriting. It says, from Charles Howard, 1973, 3rd birthday. So the child of Dr. Tom Howard, known to many of us, the late and lamented, gave me this for my 3rd birthday. And so I feel like that's an appropriately literary source for this book to have come from. But this is a book written by DuBose Hayward. Does anybody know who that is? You get extra bonus points if anyone can tell me who DuBose Hayward is. DuBose Hayward wrote a novel sometime in the 30s called Porgy, which he later developed along with George Gershwin into the opera Porgy and Bess. So that's how we know him. And then the pictures by Marjorie Flack, who also wrote The Story of Ping. She did the illustrations for The Story of Ping, if you know that book about a duck. So I probably won't have time to read the whole thing, but we can do a little spin through, again, thinking about our codes. And the literature would have us pay attention to end papers. There aren't any end papers here as such. But before we have any words or any text, we have this color, this peach color, which visually invites us into the candy-colored world of this Easter story. We also have the fact that this story was as told to Jennifer. And so we know that this is a story that DuBose Hayward just told to his daughter and then eventually wrote down. We have in the title, The Little Gold Shoes, and we have a picture of the little gold shoes. So like Chekhov's gun, right, we know that this has to go off before the end of the story. And so as readers, we will be anticipating the little gold shoes and when they come into play. We also get, on this first page, a glimpse of our heroine, who's brown and who's female. She's looking up at the title. If we're looking at the codes, she is low on the page, and she's looking up. So she has a low social status, perhaps, but her head is turned upward. Is she looking at the title of the book about her? Is she looking at somewhere in the far distance that we can't see? I think those are interesting questions to ask. So we're told on the very first page, and look at these beautiful colors. The color palette is just so Eastery and April-y. I love it. So we're told that there's not actually one Easter bunny, there are 5 Easter bunnies. And all these bunnies aspire to grow up and be one of the 5 Easter bunnies. One day, a little country girl bunny with brown skin and a little cotton ball of a tail said, "Someday I shall grow up to be an Easter bunny. You wait and see." Oh no, not you. All the big white bunnies who live in fine houses, and all the jackrabbits with long legs who can run so fast, laughed at the little cottontail and told her to go back to the country and eat a carrot. Eating a carrot here means something much different than in the other book. But she said, "Wait and see." So here we have a sequence in which she is told no by 2 different groups of people, by the rich white bunnies and the big man bunnies. Being a brown female, she has to work twice as hard for half as much. And so she gets married and has 21 baby bunnies. And everyone says, well, you'll never be Easter Bunny now. So, she trains her children, and here's a sequence in which I think we have multiple vignettes, but they're all different children, and she trains them to wash, to sweep, to cook, to mend, to do all of the work of the household. And so the sequences are not necessarily about confusion in the way that they might be if they were all the same character. I think they're about abundance and like reinforcing how many children there are and how much there is to be done. Because we also have this second page. And she's smart enough, because there's 21, what's going to become of that one little boy who's left alone? He has the important job of pulling out and pushing in her chair at the dinner table. So she's proving her parental skills. It's very interesting that someone had to help her have those babies, but he is nowhere in this book. So they hear there's an opening in the Easter Bunny sector. And she goes to the palace to audition. And I love the illustrations. We get just these glimpses of grandeur, right? We see the balustrade, we see the balcony of this place, but we don't see very much about the actual palace. And here's Grandfather Bunny. And he keeps saying to her, it's too bad you have all these children. And she says, well, I can leave home. They take care of everything. And we have this beautiful image of her lined up with her children, which is also the cover image. And he says, he seems very interested in her. He says, you must be wise to train so many children so well. But do they always look so happy? Do they always hold their ears up so prettily? Indeed they do. And she says, well, you must be very kind. It's too bad that you have not had time to grow swift. And I love this. At that, Mother Cottontail started to laugh. Then she whispered to the little bunnies, and every rabbit on the lawn looked to see what would happen, and old Grandfather leaned forward to watch. Suddenly, all of her 21 children raced away, and Cottontail dashed after them. And we're left hanging, right? And in no time at all, she had them back again. So we have this beautiful mirror of the page before. We have chaos and activity in the middle, and then the children are back to where they started. And Grandfather Bunny says, wow, you really do have all the qualifications for this job. You can become my 5th Easter Bunny. So let the record show that motherhood brought her into her career. You can have it all. So the next evening was Easter Eve, and so she heads to the palace, and again, we just get this tantalizing glimpse. And then what was probably my favorite page as a girl, inside the palace of Easter eggs. Just these glittering piles of eggs. I always feel like the palace is made of gold, maybe. And the description, and again, we get the whole page spread. This is, in some ways, maybe the center of the book. Right, the center of the journey, she's arrived, but we know that we haven't seen the little gold shoes yet. There's a further journey to be had. But the description, rooms all piled high with eggs of gold and silver, eggs that glittered like snow, chocolate eggs, marshmallow eggs, eggs for rich children and eggs for poor children, for children who were sick and children who were well all over the world. And I love that idea of her having tended her own children, going and bringing eggs to the children of the world. And in fact, near the end of the night, Grandfather Bunny says, I have a very special job for you, to take this beautiful egg to a boy who's been sick for a year, who lives at the top of a snowy mountain. It was the loveliest egg she had ever seen. It glittered like a diamond. Peek through and see what you shall see, he said. So she peeked through the little hole in one end, and she saw a beautiful scene with a sleigh and a lake with people skating on the ice. And Grandfather Bunny said, because you have such a loving heart for children, I am going to give you the best but the hardest trip of all. And so he tells her she has to go far over mountains and lakes to this cottage at the top of a mountain where this boy lives. Now, what I think is so interesting is that there's no picture of the inside of the egg. Why do we think that is? Why is there no picture of the scene that she saw looking on the inside of the egg?
So you can use your own imagination.
Absolutely. I think it's so beautiful that we can't even see it, and that Marjorie Flack did not want to depict it. We only get, again, the outside of the egg. So this idea of suggestion, I think, is so brilliant. So our bunny journeys on, and she starts hopping up, and she's almost to the top when what happens? She falls down. And we get this whole page spread, this wonderful diagonal of her in the middle. And she's in a ball almost. And she's falling away to the left, right? Which in this case signals regress. She's trying to get to the right and she falls backwards to the left. So that directionality here, that signals this defeat for her. She did everything right. She did what Grandfather Bunny asked her. She hopped and she hopped and she did her best and she failed. And here she is.
Did she break the egg?
She didn't break the egg. Well, phew. She didn't break the egg.
She's in a circle, right? She's
Right, she's protecting the egg. So here it's almost Easter Day, and I feel like, look at that image of the trees about to bud. It's so Easter morning, isn't it? It's like a perfect encapsulation of that. And she has a pain in her leg, and she doesn't know what she's going to do, and she feels like she's failed, and this poor boy who was sick for a year and didn't complain is not going to know how much he's loved. And I think that's really key. She, as a mother, feels the pain of this child's experience. But here comes Grandfather Bunny with, guess what? The little gold shoes. And she puts them on. And she thinks she's failed, but what does he say to her? He says, I just want to read the description. You know, she knew that the little boy would be sad if she did not get his egg to him. But the pain in her legs was so bad, she fell down. Then she felt something touch her shoulder, and she looked up, and there, right before her, way off in that distant land, was old, wise, kind Grandfather Bunny. And he smiled at her, and he said, "You are not only wise and kind and swift, but you are also the bravest of all the bunnies. And so I shall make you my very own gold shoe Easter bunny." And he puts the shoes on her feet. All the pain left her leg, and she picked up the precious egg. and before she knew what was happening, she felt a sudden motion, and she found herself flying high in the air at one jump. And I think what's so beautiful is that we have this set of pages that mirror each other, right? And so it's the same area. And I'm always struck by the fact that the snow on the rock is exactly the same, right? Marjorie Flack took pains to make this exactly the same part of the slope. But the codes of changing light show us that here she is rolling away in the darkness, and just a few minutes later, there she is rising along with the light, rising up to the top of the mountain, where she enters through the tiny crack that had been left open just in case the bunny came all that way. And in the hand of the beautiful sleeping boy, she placed the egg.
Which book was written first, this or The Wizard of Oz? Because the shoes are...
Right, The Wizard of Oz was written first. But that trope of, and so I think also we're getting into tropes of symbols, right? The symbol of this thing that we need to make us more, right? Or the thing that we need to make us whole, or the thing that we need despite our own efforts. Because what strikes me about her is that she did everything right. And she was also chosen. She was also extraordinarily talented and extraordinarily gifted, and it still wasn't enough to do the thing that she needed to do and that she was asked to do.
She needed a gift.
She needed a gift. And so when we think about how grace gets allegorized, I feel like this is such a beautiful moment. Because we, heaven knows, we have had situations where we have tried everything. We have used everything at our disposal, all of our talents, all of our efforts, all of our intelligence, all of our kindness, all of our patience, and it's still not enough.
I'm appreciating you bringing this topic, because one of the things I say to my kids, I miss reading to them, and I feel like we should go back to read these books or find new books in the genre that I'm ignoring now that my kids are a certain age. But, you know, thinking at 3 years old, what were you getting out of it? And now you today are the depth and breadth that you're experiencing this book today. I think as a parent, as a grandparent, I can learn something along the way. And I don't think I paid attention to, maybe I was learning how to be a better mother, better parent, better caregiver in nursery when I read these books. But I'm kind of inspired to pay attention in the future how to share and learn from children's, silly little children's books.
Thank you, Janice. That's such a beautiful affirmation of the fact that they do speak to you in different ways. When I was 3, I wasn't paying attention to the fact that she was brown and female, right? But when I read it in graduate school, I thought, this is also a feminist allegory.
And anti-racist.
And anti-racist. So, and I think exactly what Janice said, we appreciate them on a more simplistic level when we're reading, when we're little, but they really are incredibly sophisticated. And I have just brought some examples that are older. There's a whole, it's a whole genre that's still being written, that's still being innovated. There are children's books that work with space in different ways on a postmodern point of view, that go into the page and think about space as 3-dimensional, right? That also introduce new concepts and new ways of thinking about reality. So I hope, and I have to run because I have to go sing, but I hope that you will feel inspired to think a little bit more about literature for children as actually being literature for all of us. That we can continue to learn from and enjoy. And I think the extra delight that it brings maybe sometimes obscures that lesson or that, what we can take away from them. But I hope that you will all go and continue reading to the people in your life that you can read to, and read for yourselves. So thank you so much for being here today. I had so much fun with all of you.